From Trideo Media, I'm Father Roderick, and this is the Daily Breakfast. Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Breakfast. When I ask people what they want me to talk about in my daily shows, I get a lot of suggestions, and many of those suggestions are things that are usually part of my sphere of interest. There's one recurring theme that I've been perhaps neglecting a little bit the last couple of months, and that is the world of tech. And but many of you love to hear me talk about tech because it's something that technology is part of most of our lives. And one of the areas in which I am super excited, very interested in and excited about is wearable tech. Now, I have wearable tech. On my wrist, I have a TomTom watch. It's a sports watch. It has a electronic ink front, so it doesn't have the fancy OLED screens that a lot of the more expensive watches have. This watch only cost me $100, but it has a heart rate meter. It lasts for a long time on one charge. It does step counting. It's got GPS. It's got a lot of things that a number of even modern smartwatches don't have anymore. I'm not talking really about Apple, even though it's only the later models that had GPS and even like a separate G3 3G chip. So some of these Apple watches are now standalone devices. You don't need to have an iPhone to connect to those watches for them to be useful. That's of course the future. A lot of Android based watches still require you to have an Android phone. And that is where Google is seeing a major problem. They've seen that they've tried to make their operating system a success by striking all these deals with fashion companies, companies that made fancy watches that are more like a statement than actual useful tools. And that approach has failed tremendously. 1/3 of the people that own an Android-based smartwatch actually own an iPhone, an Apple device. And so they have announced a different approach. They're going to rename Android Wear, which is the name of their operating system for smartwatches, to Wear OS. And they've also stated that from now on, what they want to do is to build a wearable platform for everyone, including people that don't have an Android-based phone. And that makes me hopeful. For a long time, I wondered why Google was just sitting and waiting for things to happen. We know that one of the reasons that the Android-based smartwatches are in such a rut is the fact that Qualcomm is the only company that made a chip for smartwatches. And their last model is from 2015. That's a 3-year-old technology, whereas companies like Samsung, they have their own operating system, Tizen, Apple, and even a smaller player like Fitbit have been developing their own hardware, their own chipsets. The downside is that they don't play well with the Android Google ecosystem. And what makes the Google ecosystem so interesting is that they are currently building up this Google Home system with, I think, unparalleled voice recognition. It's so much better than anything else that I've seen. Plus, just recently, they've created the ability for users of Google Home to create tasks that consist of various subtasks. So you can now actually give commands to your Google Assistant saying, for instance, I'm home, and then Google understands that, hey, I gotta put up the lights. I've got to open the digital curtains or whatever. Switch on the television. Start your favorite program. Start the microwave. So you can link a lot of different subtasks to one statement, one command, which is super advanced. And that is where, of course, we need to go. And that can get more and more complex over time. But the entrance to all that is, of course, a good voice system. And that is where Siri has continued to struggle so far. And even though voice commands are part of Siri, are part of the Apple Watch and part of the iOS, and now even on Mac OS, one of the reasons that Siri is lagging behind and is so problematic for people that want to be a bit more ecumenical in their usage of technology, like I am. I love Apple. I work with a lot of Apple devices, but I also work with the PC, with Windows, with Android devices, and I want to have one hub that can use all that technology, especially when I'm speaking. I don't want to have to specify to which device I'm talking. And I think in that respect, Siri has kind of dropped the ball. And there was a very interesting article that appeared in, it's behind a paywall, so you can't read it, but there is a summary on, was it on MacRumors, macrumors.com, a summary of an article that's based on interviews with anonymized interviews, because of course all these people have an NDA, former Apple employees that have worked on Siri, and that details what went wrong. And I think even Apple owners must agree that Siri is not the best voice system. It may work very well for you, but for a lot of people it doesn't work as well, and it seems to get more sluggish, and it's not improving. Quite on the contrary. Well, so what is going on? I think what the article reveals is that when Apple bought Siri, because Siri was not part of Apple at first, it was a separate app. They bought it because they wanted to introduce that technology with, I think, the iPhone 4 or the i4S or something like that, and they rushed it without really thinking this through. So what will happen 2-3 years from now? They wanted to be the first to have this voice recognition system in their software. And so they rushed Siri to the market without making it scalable. And that has hampered them years afterwards, because Siri proved to be way more popular than Apple could have guessed at the beginning. And so the technology behind the scenes was struggling to keep up, and they couldn't scale it. And they hadn't thought about all these other languages and complex things that people would require the system to understand, et cetera, et cetera. And so at one point, I think it was last year, they finally, after a lot of infights, and there were people were fired, and all the people that were heading the development of Siri originally are now no longer working for Apple. They finally brought it to the department that is headed by Federici. So they wanted to make Siri a part of any operating system, of kind of more of the infrastructure of Apple services, which I think indicates that they probably are rebuilding it up from the ground, which is so much harder to do than starting the right way, because now they have to keep Siri working and at the same time completely redo it behind the scenes. I'm hoping, I have faith in Federici. I think he's one of the few people at Apple who really have a vision and who's ambitious. I hope that at the next WWDC, the developers conference, we will see a better, almost like a Siri 2.0. I think it really, if they want to compete in the future, if they want to continue to lead, they need to do something about Siri. Well, Google is not standing still, thankfully, and the fact that they've announced that they are going to develop Wear OS, kind of rebuild it as an operating system for any wearable device, regardless of what other operating systems you work with, gives me a lot of hope that they will do it right. And what I secretly hope is that Google goes one step further, because what's hampering them now, actually the current operating system for smartwatches is pretty good, pretty impressive. You can have a smartwatch and just do I won't do the trigger alarm, but you can give voice commands. That's what that's what I want. Star Trek technology. I want Google Home on my wrist. Well, the thing that's holding back the development of new smartwatches is this Qualcomm problem. Qualcomm, and of course they've been busy with the kind of the menace of Broadcom trying to buy it, and Trump stopping that. But that of course doesn't create a lot of peace for this company to go to the next level with these wearables. Why doesn't Google developed their own chipset. They've done so much hardware, and I think this is definitely this should be something they should do. They've done the phones, the Pixel phones, very good phones, not very successful in the marketplace, but extremely good hardware. VR headsets, they've done speakers, they've done the little in-ear headphones, they've done cameras. I think smartwatches should be next, and if Google does that, I think it will fly. And seeing how much they're building up Google Home and Google Assistant, and it's amazing. Google Assistant is getting better every day, and I know it because I use Google Assistant every day. I think over time they may be able to lead and to go beyond what Apple is going to do, because Apple has this Siri problem. I'm serious. Okay, that was cheap. Anyway, love to hear your thoughts. Are you the owner of a smartwatch, be it Android-based or Tizen-based or Fitbit? Or let me know in the comments what your wearable is, what you're using, and how you like it. Because I'm still on the fence. I just keep my TomTom because it does limited things, but it does them very well. But over time, this is kind of bulky, and it's not very elegant. So I want something better, but it needs to be able to do the Star Trek thing. Ultimately, perhaps one day it can beam me up. All right. That's it for today. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And more shows are available on our Trideo media platform, trideo.com, Trideo.com. That's also where you can find a link to my Patreon page. If you want to become a patron and support me on a monthly basis to help me do what I do now and also expand what I do, then in return, as a thank you, I'll give you access to a separate exclusive feed just for my patrons in which I answer all your questions. The show is called Ask Father Roderick, and if you are a patron, you are already familiar with that show. But if you're not and you're curious, this may be a good reason for you to join the community of patrons. And of course, I'll be super thankful because it helps me do what I do. Couldn't do it without you. And coming up, I've been reminding you all week long, between Easter and Pentecost, we're going to do our first Trideo fund drive for 2 amazing projects that I think are going to really be such a great thing. And it's not there, and it should be there. It's an introduction to the faith using Lego and using Star Wars. 2 visual video projects that go beyond just consumer videos. I want them to be helpful. I want them to be useful to do what is so difficult nowadays, and that is to transmit the faith to the new generation. I think with Lego and Star Wars, we've got 2 languages, and I speak both languages quite well, but I need funding to kind of turn that into projects that people all over the world will be able to use. Keep that in mind, and I'll talk about that fund drive much more next week. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.